on?
Okay, I'm gonna
Is it
turn it off
already on?
then.
Okay.
Let's.
Um, okay. I had this one.
Okay, it's on.
The first time I took magic mushrooms, I had this one experience where I looked at my hand, and my hand started to turn super old and veiny, like an old person's hand, and then it like I my body, I would look at my body, and it would start to age and decay, and it would like, and then it would go back into young, and then it would turn back into like it was about to die. Um, so I start I had like I was literally tripping about the impermanence of my body. Like I looked at my body and I watched it age into old and veiny body. Like like the skin became more like see-through and the veins became more obvious all the way until I could see the bones. And then and then that was like a direct confrontation with the fact that although I'm like very young and youthful right now, it's inevitable, and it's only a matter of time that uh, this body is going to die, and it's going to get old, and it's going to get sick and die. So it's important to break the delusion of youthfulness.
How old are
Um,
you?
what?
How old are you?
I'm 25 right now.
You are already dying.
Yeah, I'm already.
It's
You're dying
exactly 25.
since the day you were born. You're dying.
25. Around 25. The processes or building cells are less than what's decaying. So 25 is around the time where you officially dying.
Right. Right, and then also, there's a type of meditation where you can contemplate like all the gross parts of the body that you don't normally think about. So like you think about your body like on the outer appearance of things, and you think of like, oh, that's me, and you think like, oh, I'm like either you think you're beautiful or ugly, either way, it's an attachment to clinging. But you didn't get into the nitty-gritty details. Like you didn't get into like you didn't contemplate like the hair and the hair follicles and the skin and the layers of skin and the bones, the bones that are within your muscles and all the oil of the joints and such, and all the organs, like all the disgusting intestines and stuff, and all the facets of the body that you just don't normally think about. So like, um, I mean, I guess like this is kind of like a weird meditation. Like maybe it's not for everyone, but I found it useful to like sort of dissect myself um, mentally. Like I would go into like every organ of the body and like not only try to visualize it, but also try to experience like where is that organ right now in my experience of the body. Like, oh, let me try to experience the diaphragm, let me try to experience the lungs, let me try to experience the heart and the heart beating, and let me try to experience the intestines, and let me try to experience the liver or um,
Spleen.
the kidneys as well, and um, every fiber of every muscle. So like, I guess this is kind of like a body scanning practice, but like it's more like I try to make it more of like a also death contemplation in the sense that like I'm like I'm really looking at the 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 human body as like for what it is, you know? Instead of like identifying as a self with it, really it is it's a bunch of blood and a bunch of skin and a bunch of meat bags and like and organs and stuff like that. So like if you actually dissect yourself like that mentally, it's disidentifies you from it like naturally. So like you see the body for what it really is it's like a meat suit. And if you can if you can there's kind of it's I find it kind of enjoyable actually. It might be a little scary or gross, but like it's a good meditation. And also, that reminds me of the story of Ramana Maharshi, who um, he just lied down and he accepted that he was going to die, and like accepted all the implications of that, and then somehow that disidentified him from the mind and the body, and there seemed to be not self, which is freedom from the clinging to your mind and your body, and you're no longer concerned with the fate or the destiny of the mind and the body, or what's going to happen to it, because you see the real nature of it. What is the real nature of what's going to happen to the body? Is it's going to die. So what happens in between the body right now and it dying is really not that important because of the ultimate destiny of it. So you're less concerned with like the 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 petty trivial um, anxieties about what is going to happen in the future, because you already know ultimately what's going to happen in the future. So you're less concerned with like worldly affairs when you fully understand that you're going to die. So then your interests will start to develop in a way that uh, is more conducive to the Dhamma or the path. So the freedom from um, um, death and birth and death, and the cycle of it. How do I escape the cycle? Instead of being interested in the cycle itself, you become interested in the liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and you can start to experientially see uh, how birth and death arises, and you can see that death is uh, dependently originated by birth, and they are ultimately go together. They're two sides of the same coin. So arising and passing away is another way to think about it. Birth and death, um, um, coming into being and passing, and cessation, um, emptiness and form. So you can see these dualities are dependent in nature on each other. And when you see that experientially and profoundly, um, you can say that's seeing the Dhamma or seeing the truth. And you see the truth, you see the whole cycle of it, the whole structure, and the whole dependent origination of it. Then you're not bound by it. You're not fooled by it. You're not hypnotized by the cycle, and you're no longer on the treadmill of it, the hamster wheel of samsara, so to speak, of just running and running along, of craving and aversion, pleasure and pain, um, uh, gain and loss, all of these things, all the eight worldly winds, um, is what uh, the opposite ends of the treadmill or the hamster wheel that you're running along on. And instead of you stop running on the hamster wheel, because the more you run on it, the more it goes. It just has more and more momentum until you have to run faster and faster. You stop and you literally get out of the hamster wheel, because that's what's seeing the cycle of it all, and seeing the truth of like what's really going on behind the scenes. So you can say it's kind of like looking behind the curtains of the play and seeing the backstage of the play, all the features, and so like the play is like there's a bunch of like characters like built with like 2x4s and um, different puppets and like animatronics and stuff, and investigating and looking how it really is going behind the scenes, seeing what it's actually made of, and seeing seeing the illusion of it. So then it's much less scary. So uh, if you're only looking at this life without deconstructing it, it without investigating it, and you're totally hypnotized by it, and you take it to be um, substantial, you take it to be permanent, you take it to be real, then you're going to be it's essentially like a little kid watching a movie, a scary movie, and the little kid can't differentiate the scary movie from reality. So they're going to be really terrified by the movie because they can't differentiate it. So like spiritual adulthood is similar to watching a scary movie. Like you can enjoy how it's scary, but you ultimately know it's just a movie. So it takes the kind of terror out of it, and it's much less scary. I think that's the end of my little spiel. So if anyone has anything to comment or say about that, please go ahead.
The disgusting thing reminds me of like you watch when you watch porn and then you finish your act and then you're just disgusted by what you see. You know, the genitals and everything, and you're sitting there in your filth, just like being disgusted by this human body.
Right, yeah. Kind of like that. It's like kind of like a dispassion, a disenchantment.
Mm.
So like to find the true happiness or the true Dhamma or the true Nibbana, you have to become disenchanted with lesser happinesses. So like you if you think that happiness, if you still delight in like sensual pleasure, if you think that happiness is going to come from sex or it's going to come from any sense of the sensual pleasures or like worldly gains that you might get, or like you think it's going to come from money, or you think it's going to come from um, any phenomenal aspect or relative aspect of this human experience, then you'll continue to be fooled by it, and you'll continue to be like, if you ever seen like a cartoon where it's like a dog, and attached to the dog is like a hot dog with a stick holding a hot dog in front of it, and it's just like chasing after it. That's like chasing after sensual pleasures. But if you see sensual pleasures as illusory and the prattle of fools, then you become disenchanted with it. So you become disenfranchised with the normal mechanism of seeking pleasure, which is most of the motivation of humans, and like what drives society.
Regarding the Eightfold Noble Path, what would you say is the one or two or whatever most important qualities to be skillfully applied to really get this? Because I find in my practice, especially situations where the body is very present, very much deconstructing wisdom, because the pull is so strong. So what would you say?
So okay, let me try to understand this. Your experience of your body is distracting you per se from the investigation or the wisdom. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Okay, so yeah, you experience cravings that are related to the body. So the body craves for sex, the body craves for food, the body craves for all these things. And then essentially what you need to see clearly is that these are product of biological mechanisms, instead of identifying with it like, oh, I need sex or I want sex. You see what's really going on is the body has evolutionary initiative to crave these things, because it's literally built into its structure and its functions. So, but again, like we said, what is the body really? If you see it clearly, it's not what you are. So like it's just a conglomerate of functions and processes that so like these cravings, like I don't think it's possible to stop craving food. I mean, if you eat less food, you'll crave less food, but ultimately you need to eat to survive. And some say it's possible to stop craving sex entirely, but I don't think that's realistic. I think it's just a product of, just like craving food is. It's just a product of the human body. So instead of trying to repress these cravings, it's better to just see them for what they really are and understand that the fulfillment of these cravings is not the way to satisfaction, or is not the way to happiness, and it won't end suffering. It will just create more. It will just continue the process of pleasure and pain. So like pleasure is born out of the end of pain, and pain is born out of the end of pleasure. So they just flip-flop. So it's never truly satisfying. Whereas the experience of the Dhamma and the experience of the jhana and the experience of nibbana comes with a sense of finally satisfied. So it's not just like a it's not like other pleasures. It's not like other delights. Even if you have sex, like, and you say that's the best experience, how long does that really last? I mean, not long for some of us, right? so I mean, what really good is that? I mean, how is that going to fulfill you? How is that going to satisfy you? It won't. You're just going to want more. You're going to eventually want more. But with developing the right skill and the right practices, we can reliably enter into a state of satisfaction, enter into a state of not wanting anything. So all of these desires of the body is wanting something is actually what's making you suffer. And even if you get what you want, the body gets what it wants, only very briefly and only temporarily are you satisfied. But what is that satisfaction really? It's not getting what you want, but it's the cessation of wanting that thing that makes you happy. So we can directly see
for a certain period of time.
Yeah, and it's always replaced by wanting something else. So if we can directly see the mechanism of dukkha nirodha simply being wanting something and then stopping wanting that thing, or stopping wanting something, we can see that if we can stop wanting anything right now, we can be satisfied and happy simply by not wanting anything right now. You don't need anything right now. You got everything you need. You could just sit here and not want anything. And that's how to practice.
The thing how I understood is when you said like wisdom gets like clouded. It's whenever I see the cloudiness in the wisdom, I know that there's some kind of judgment. Oh, this desire is bad. Oh, this desire is good. And then your mind kind of gets more cloudy because now you're placing like value on things. Now you're actually determining what is right for you and what is not right for you, instead of allowing it to naturally unfold by itself. Like Scott said, sometimes you're hungry, sometimes you need to eat, sometimes you're horny, so sometimes you need to fuck. It comes down to that kind of level. In reality, you don't really need any of these things, but the resistance is what kind of holds them in your body. The resistance, not essentially not participating in them, but the resistance of the mind, the judgment, the holding on to it, the clinging. And the clinging arises from that initial holding. Just keep it holding as an object, saying this is good, I should not want this. Or even
Well,
if it happens, then you still hold on to it and you still judge it and you say, oh, I shouldn't have done this, or what, the next desire comes, I probably should abstain from it, or constantly like being vigilant about it can really cloud the mind as
One of
well.
them is the level of ordinary right view of I should not do this thing because society tells me not to, because my parents tell me not to, because the Buddha tells me not to. But the supermundane right view is on the similar tone to what Scott's talking about with the Ashuva meditation, or the meditation on the repulsiveness of the body. That this is developing actual wisdom as to why these things aren't worthwhile. That this repulsiveness. One point about it is that the Scott mentioned this, that the skin, the first layer of the body, is sort of attractive in a way that doesn't need to be, right? It's sort of the baseline of it is attractive. The baseline of a female body is attractive. There's liking there.
The skin is sex. If you hadn't your skin, you wouldn't have sex.
And we wouldn't be so attracted if it wasn't for the skin. So investigating what's under there, and that stuff's gross. And this came up when reading a Mahaboa book that I got at the Wat. That he talks a lot about this Subha meditation and the charnel ground meditation, where the monks watch as the body what's the word, falls apart, gets old, the skin rots away, and it's just bones, it's just muscles, and this isn't necessary. This is only beneficial when there's an unnecessary attraction to the body, and it helps with that disenchantment, and to see with wisdom instead of the ignorant point of view, where that skin is beautiful. I want to go chase that skin. I want to kiss that skin. Oh, I love the skin. Where if we see what's under it, there's a bunch of muscle, tendons, bones, blood. It's not as attractive.
An important point to make is that none of these things are inherently bad. So there's nothing inherently bad about having sex. There's nothing inherently bad about enjoying food,
exactly,
and so on. But what inherently causes suffering is the craving for these things. So the craving for sex when you're not having sex is dukkha, right? So, but there's nothing inherently bad about the activity itself. But to realize
the thing is, we think it's inherently good.
Yeah.
Ignorantly.
We crave for it. The problem isn't the thing; it's the craving for the thing. And to realize that all you really need, as long as you're alive, all you really need is this moment, is the breath. So, yes, you need to eat like at least once a day. I recommend the less the better. So it does mention in the suttas how the Buddha abstains from eating in the evenings, and he delights in the well-being and the health from it. And I do intermittent fasting every day, and it feels great. So I try to eat like once a day. So I think there is really something to that. But when you don't need food, when you're not eating, to recognize all you really need is the breath and the next breath. And that's what the body actually needs right now, is the breath. And so to bring that into your attention and to take a deeper breath and realize that the breath is enough. You can go the rest of your life without having sex, you'll survive and be fine. But you can't go the next 4 minutes without breathing. So to empty yourself out of all of these extracurricular desires and realize that, oh, all I really need is this breath right now. And you can come into a state of satisfaction, because you will always be able to, as long as you're alive, you'll always be able to breathe. Wanting what you already got and enjoying what you already got is satisfying. And actually, the breath can be thoroughly enjoyed. So not to make a rule out of breathing meditation, not to make a rule out of, I need to breathe a certain amount of seconds in and a certain amount of seconds out. No, like that's missing the point. But to start to enjoy the breath and see that, experiment with the breath and see, oh, if I change the rhythm, like, oh, now this breath is kind of more enjoyable if I take breaths like this now, and I take a little. But even just thinking about how you're breathing is going to lead to taking more oxygenating breaths, I guess. Like how you breathe affects how the body feels directly. So what style of breath you're doing is really beside the point, but the point is to take enjoyable breaths. Enjoyable.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
So I've recently been like going through all this like monastic, like Thai monks, like a lot of like Cambodian monks, and reading a lot about them. And I find that towards like older age, most of them die from like diseases that are completely like preventable nowadays, like diabetes, or at least like diet related, like diabetes, psoriasis, like all of these diseases that are caused by like modern food waves, or like by, I don't know, things, and they just did nothing about it. They would just sit and think like meditation was gonna make it go away, or they just didn't care for the body, like to sustain it. But I found it quite funny, because I would assume like the spiritual health raises from the healthy body as well. So why did none of them actually like really pay any attention to it? Or you could look at it from another point of view, that the food was not that accessible, or they would have to put a lot of effort in like providing for themselves, and they would have to drop out their monastic life or teaching life in order to go provide for themselves.
So
I found it quite interesting.
diabetes, heart disease, cancers. Cancer can happen no matter how healthy you are. Like cancer happens to children all the time, but the correlative studies show that cancer's diabetes, heart disease is related to, yes, the health of the body and the how much you're eating. So, but this is more preventative. So if you already have cancer, already have diabetes, yes, changing how you eat will help it, but you should probably seek professional medical care. But if you don't overeat and you stop overeating now, you're going to be at a much lower risk of developing cancer later on, of developing heart disease later on, of developing diabetes later on. Not to say that you can't still get cancer but the correlative studies show higher rates of these things happening with directly how we eat. So
we can also recognize that medicine is good in many ways, but oftentimes the death of someone who dies naturally in their home, not on a respirator, of natural causes, might be more wholesome, more relaxed than the death of someone who is, for example, in Buddhadasa's case, flown to a hospital while he's unconscious and put on a respirator and being kept alive. That might be a less pleasant death than I think the situation was that he requested that not happen, but he was unconscious at the time. So the government, and since he was so famous, it was went along with. But a lot of times, a more natural death would be more relaxing, more peaceful, just with your family around you and without doctors surrounding you, trying keeping you alive. Always about to die. His heart rate's flatlining. There are benefits that we don't recognize when we're thinking about, oh, he survived 3 more years in the hospital.
Right.
No, my question is like,
So
a lot of them develop disease over 15, 20 years, but they didn't do anything when they were initially diagnosed. That's my question. I mean, I understand that at a certain age you're just like, fuck it. But a lot of them develop disease in their 55, 60, like it's still plenty of time. Like the average age was like 80 to die. Like you still have 20, 25 years of actually like changing your lifestyle and still being healthy, but none of them actually partaken in any of that. They would just rather drop in 3-4 years from the same disease that can be prevented, but like they wouldn't do anything
well,
about
that's up to them. So who are we to tell them what they should or shouldn't do? But yeah, along the lines of what Parker said, you know, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and he died a couple months ago. But at a certain point, the cancer got to the stage where there was really no coming back from it. Like it was just a matter of how long are you going to live afterwards. But my dad really couldn't accept that. He couldn't accept his own death. So he took chemo till the very bitter end, and he suffered greatly from increasing doses of chemotherapy all the way till the very end, when at a certain point, what might be wise is to start to accept that this body is going to die. Stop putting the chemo and the poisoning in, because at that point, realistically, there's literally no chance of going into remission. So maybe the chemo keeps you alive a couple more weeks, but it's better to live your last days in comfort and acceptance, in resolution, than it is to continue like keeping the body alive artificially and just pumping stuff into it, and you know, doing all these things that might prolong the life of the body for a little bit, but it's at what cost, right?
And
At
also,
what cost?
in regards to what you said before about the monks, they should decide what they do, etc. I mean, I think Carl was just curious about maybe if there are studies, comparative studies about the situation of monks and the ordinary population, West and Eastern. There probably are a few. I can't come up with one right now, but I think I see something in the back of my mind. Maybe it comes up. in the end, and this is where I think a lifelong practice is very beneficial, to make this decision. If you are seeing yourself confident enough to make this to have this judgment power, to say, okay, no, I'm not going to take any more chemo. I'm not going to take this anymore, because this is like, you're thinking about the future in this moment, and this is unwholesome. So it doesn't work that way. All this talking about those things for the person in that situation won't probably of much help, as you probably want them to help with what you're saying. So
I'm sorry, can you say that a little bit more clearly? I'm not getting the gist of what you're trying to say.
it's about what we talked before. The talk about those things seems very artificial to me, because it's very intellectual, it's very philosophical, and even if you take science into account, statistics, whatever, studies and so on, if you are prone to intellectual behavior, if you're prone to intellectual thinking, this may be something for you. But who knows what happens with a person in the situation where the fear comes up and you feel, okay, this is it.
Yeah,
You know?
so that's the whole point, is that instead of prolonging the fear of death, we're directly facing the fear of death right now, directly realizing that this body is going to die. Instead of postponing it and distracting ourselves from our entire life until we're faced with, oh, now we are really dying. We look at the fact of the matter right now, that we're going to die. And so we learn to face death with wisdom when it comes, because we're not caught off guard by it. We're prepared. So once you start handling things, once you stop living in ignorance and you start handling things and harsh realities, and not lying to yourself, not creating some sort of magical beliefs that's going to distract you from it, or not. Most religion is promising. Most religion is based off the fear of death. So no, we're going to look at the fear of death and realize that if we can handle this moment, we can handle even our own death. So it's a completely different approach, than most people are used to. Most people don't want to think about the fact that they're going to die, but the fact is they are going to die. So would you rather face death afraid and scared, or would you rather face death joyfully and leave other people with a smile, as Dhammarato says? Can you crack jokes even on your deathbed, and can you make other people happy?
You bet.
So
I'll be with that.
But I'm still like I'm not questioning anything. I completely agree with everything around death. What I'm not really getting is how somebody can be diagnosed with something and not to make a change in that particular moment, because that's the practice, is to make a change. How long are you gonna wait until you make a change? Like
don't get me wrong. I think if anyone has a disease or a medical issue, they should seek professional help and do what the professionals tell them to do, and try to live their. They shouldn't just die on purpose, right? That's not what I'm saying here. But I'm saying that
about like seeking help. I'm talking about like taking charge of their own individual.
We can establish, or we have established, that at a certain point in the path, someone has to let go of that that both craving for life and craving for death, that it's whatever is okay. That one has to find other reasons for their actions rather than the previous reasons of, like what Scott was talking about with his dad, is the self-preservation instinct, right? The instinctual wanting for life. So why do we stay alive? Is it because it's easier that way? Is it because we think we'll be of benefit for other people? And that's up to the monk's particular discernment of since if he was skilled in correct practice, he would be able to discern that fear of death, that self-preservation instinct, and then come to other reasons. Is it wise to live or is it wise not to? And that might be, I'm not familiar with the Thai medical system like. Maybe he knows something I don't about that. Maybe he's less educated in terms of Western medicine. There are many factors in terms to what makes up that monk's particular discernment. But what we can understand is that most people don't want to die because they're scared of it. And now we have the wisdom and discernment to have a wiser relationship with death.
So we can essentially still value the knowledge that we have in modern day, or the knowledge of that arises in the present moment, as far as like if you need to make a change and you do have the knowledge to make a change, it would be not wise to not make a change as far as like your health or whatever. We don't know if these monks did have the knowledge, or as you said, or if they didn't have the knowledge of like the medical system, the health, the diets, whatever it was the case. But it's still pretty interesting how like intellectual knowledge and science is quite beneficial. Not, I don't want to say important, but I want to say beneficial to us, because it can essentially, not just in talking prolonging life, but I'm talking complementing the practice. I'm talking health wise. Like we know that the practice tends to be, we can even see that scientifically, that's why they're doing all these studies of like mindfulness, etc. We can see that the healthier bodies tend to respond to meditation practices. Like it goes together, it goes like hand in hand together. So it's pretty interesting, because we didn't have knowledge 50-60 years ago, but now we can see that, okay, so there might be something within the body, not only just the mind, that you set your mind on a certain point and you can free yourself from the self, but the body plays a part in that as well.
In the Dhamma Vinaya,
that's
definitely a few points that are historically relevant, and maybe it's time for a change in certain things. So this is probably a statement you definitely can make if there's anything going to change. I mean, almost every tradition has other particular specifics and how they operate with the Dhamma Vinaya. I mean, if I think about Dalai Lama, he started to eat meat again because the doctor said, please eat meat again because it's beneficial for your health. So who knows?
Something Carl said made me think of it's important to understand that the mind and the body are one system. So a relaxed body is a relaxed mind, and vice versa. So yeah, we should take care of the body, because taking care of the body is the same as taking care of your mind. And there's no one rule, right way to eat per se. Like, it's not as if you can't eat, need to make hard and strict rules, but there's in general, there's common knowledge out there, and there's research about what type of food is not good for you. So saturated fats and sugar and stuff like that, not to eat those in moderation, obviously. But
this is a very interesting topic, because I'm studying this now for quite some years, and especially those things with very light alcohols, carbohydrate alcohols, or with saturated fats and omega-3 fatty acids and whatever. If you really take your time for the studies, it's almost impossible to find guidelines, even very loose guidelines for what is a good diet, if it's not embedded in the culture you're living in. And the culture is like good sleep, good people around you, good friendships, and all that, the blue zones and stuff like this. I think it's really interesting what Carl says, because Carl makes a very good point. Most people try to put away very fast with some explanation, because I mean, this is why we came to where we are now. This is why we can talk now here through Skype and things like that. Intermittent fasting, for example. I mean, in the Thai tradition, intermittent fasting is standard because of the Dhamma Vinaya. If you can only eat once a day and you have your arms round, and then you have at least your 16 hours of intermittent fasting window. But there are so many more complex things, and this is where I think Parker comes in with a more Dhamma explanatory statements he makes about this. Is if you're really, and this is especially also with sex thing and so on, if you're really practicing this way, with this right noble wisdom from the get-go, especially if you're only a child and you get this lifestyle, you have nothing to attach those fears to, really. And maybe this is a completely different situation, especially for Westerners. I think maybe it's a different thing. And I think Dhammarato addresses this also with other themes a couple of times, that with the Westerners we have a different source of clinging, maybe a different source of how paticca samuppada works in this regard. And my question would be, if anyone has something to say about this, how we could approach this with what we are trying to practice here, because I think this will be right now beneficial for us, because we can do these changes now if we want to. And on the other hand, every one of us is going to die. And I don't know if it's beneficial to not consider lifestyle related diseases, for example.
I think this certainly the first step is, whatever we're doing, is to get the mind in a wholesome state first, and remove the hindrances from the mind, remove the fears of, oh, I'm going to die, I'm scared of that, so I'm going to eat healthy. And that to find wiser reasons for it. That lifestyle is easier if eating healthy, so why not, right? Take it or leave it. And considering the particular lifestyle, like we're talking about monks, they have a different lifestyle. They don't choose what they eat. They get offered the food and they eat the food they're offered. And that's up to the lay people what food they offer. Part of the practice of generosity, that you don't, when someone's offering food, say, no, I don't eat that. No, you take the food and you eat it. That's the lifestyle of the monks. And in fact, the death of the Buddha was because it was related to him eating some pork that someone gave him that wasn't very healthy. And there's a research paper on it. I'm not well informed enough about it to say whether it's true or false or to talk about the nuances, but some pork-related illness, which eventually led to his death. This is talked about in the Mahiparabana Sutta, the long sutta about the Buddha's death. So that the key is to first get the mind cleaned out, get the mind in a wholesome state. And then once we're seeing clearly, we can use discernment to choose how we live, to choose, is this food wise to eat? Is this food not wise to eat? And in the case of a monk, the boundaries are different. It's wise to eat what the person gave you in the sake of generosity and such, or take what the person gave you. But as a layperson, we have options as to what we eat. So we have different options. So we can say go to the farm market if we think that's wise, or get food that is more whole if we think that's wise. So the particular prescriptions are not completely relevant in the sense of when we're talking here about Dhamma. What's important is get the mind cleaned out, get the mind into a wholesome state. And then it's up to you what discernments you take. It's up to you what food you take, depending on what wisdom you have, what research you've done, and how you weigh the facts.
That's what
Also,
I kind of. Sorry, I'll go real quick. That's what I wanted to connect, is because we also can see that if the mind is not clear, then the body cannot like process the food. If the mind is stressed, like your body is not gonna process the food at all. But it also comes to connect that, I don't know if this is just my personal experience. If I'm eating, and if I'm eating with wisdom, if I'm eating cleaner foods, if I'm practicing keeping my body healthy in a correct way, the practice benefits from that. So, but I also seen that way before I got into the practice. So that's why I'm trying to correlate these two factors together.
Certainly, and another point I wanted to mention is this is more of a Western issue as about the healthy food, because in Eastern Asian cultures, the diet tends to be a little bit more well balanced, a little bit more healthy. So, there's lower rates of obesity in Asian countries than there is in Western countries, and that's largely due to the diet. So it's kind of not as much of an issue if in a Thai country, in Thailand, as for like the food that the lay people are going to be giving the monks is going to be in general like more healthy than, let's say, like Burger King or McDonald's. So it's more of a problem in Western countries because of the proliferation of fast food and the popularity of really unhealthy foods. So it's more important, I think, for us to be wise about what we eat, because we're not just eating healthy stuff because there's only healthy stuff around, or balanced stuff. Another thing I wanted to say is, yes, so the reason for eating healthy food is different. So it's not because we're afraid of dying, but eating healthy food is more conducive to experiencing a happy body, or experiencing piti and sukha, which is conducive to being satisfied. So it's directly in relation to the practice of coming into comfort and ease and satisfaction. It's directly correlated with that, rather than being afraid of potential future diseases, and being afraid of the body dying is sort of an ignorant reason to make healthy lifestyle choices. Whereas the reason for healthy lifestyle choices is because for the sake of dukkha nirodha, essentially. How can we eliminate as much dukkha as possible? So like if you're, like Dhammarato always says, if you're sitting uncomfortably and your leg starts to really hurt, just sitting through that pain and discomfort is not beneficial. It's not conducive to sukha. So you should seek to adjust the body into a more comfortable position, the same way we adjust our diet into a more eating cleaner or more just more healthy diet for a more healthy body. A more healthy body can experience more comfort, but it's more like a supplementary thing to the actual practice. The actual practice is being satisfied, irrespective of the state of the body. But certainly, eating unhealthy is not going to provide for you. It's going to provide unnecessary dukkha. So eliminating unnecessary dukkha is wise. But it's not going to, like, in and of itself, it's not sufficient to eliminate dukkha, period.
Yeah, that was cool. I was making that connection. Also find it like now that like soon we're not gonna be able to say that like Eastern cultures are more healthy than Western cultures, because all the Eastern cultures are catching up in cancer rates and diseases as well, as we see the
Right.
Western food getting more popular in those countries. Like Thailand is very popular with like KFC and stuff like that, and
Yeah, so it
India,
starts
all
to
of
be,
these places.
it's more of the more developed the country is, like it seems like the more developed the country is, the higher obesity rates is. So like the first world countries, and as Asian countries start to develop and like fast food chains start to spread out into these countries, we're going to see the same effects, right? But in general, like the traditional the traditional Asian diet is pretty well balanced. Like got your veggies, got some rice, got some usually lower amounts of meat, so not like a ton of meat. Whereas in America, like, or in the West, like it'll be like a ton of meat, like a big steak or something. Whereas it's little bits of meat like mixed in with vegetables and other stuff in Asian food. Another diet that's correlated with long lifespans is the Mediterranean diet. So that's a pretty healthy diet, and it consists of like higher amounts of like seafood rather than red meats. So seafood has different type of fat. It's healthier. It doesn't stack up. It doesn't clog arteries as much. It has more kinks in the structure of the fat. So it's actually better for you. But again, I think just the main thing with eating is not eating more than you need. So if you are eating as an emotional coping mechanism, you're probably going to overeat. So if you're desiring and craving for the food, not because your body needs it, but because you are trying to distract yourself from some inner discomfort, this is where it starts to spiral out of control. And so like you're going to be snacking to avoid boredom, or snacking to avoid this, or eating food and then becoming full and eating more and more of it just because you're craving for you're craving for it. You're craving for the experience of the senses rather than just eating until you're full and then stopping and not eating more than that. and like, I mean, no matter what you eat, if you eat only when what your body actually needs, it's going to be a much healthier way of eating, and not eating because you're trying to cope with some emotions.
Well, yeah, that comes back to, like, I feel like being intuitive with your body. As you dive deeper into this, you become more intuitive what your body actually needs. Sometimes it needs a bit more fat, sometimes it needs some sugar, sometimes it needs some water, sometimes it needs something else. And yeah, it's that's about it. I just found it interesting how these monks were just dying, and I was like, oh, if they only knew. And I just found it, like, quite fascinating how, like, none of them actually took any course of action to change for like 20-30 years. The ones that develop disease in later life, I completely understand, but the making of the choice in the present moment, I couldn't understand that, because I guess that's just from my personal point of view of the knowledge that I have now of this evolved Western world of, like, the medicine and such. Is really hard to comprehend, but who knows back then what was the reasoning in the case, as you guys said. I thought it was just an interesting topic to bring up, as it correlates. Yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing else. I think I'm going to sign off here. It was good to see everyone. I think the talk was a little bit morose today, but I think it was still useful. Not a lot of people talk about this aspect of the Dhamma, of contemplating the repulsiveness of the body, but I think it's a very fruitful and useful practice. And another toy to play with. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
All
a
right,
toy to play with, not a job to do. I'm gonna head out as
Yeah.
well. It was great seeing
All
you
right.
guys.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.